Welcome back to another episode of Addicted to Gear. I'm really glad you can join me once again. Today I want to share with you 35 tips to use when buying new or used gear. And I think these tips will help you avoid any snags or little issues that you can possibly fall into, the little traps when you're buying new or used stuff. You know how it is when you're addicted to gear, you're constantly trading up, looking for that next best pedal, amp, or guitar. And oftentimes when you're making those deals, either from a store or from somebody selling their stuff used online, you want to make sure you're getting the best deal possible. And these little tips are designed to help you achieve that. And these are tips that I wish somebody was around to share with me when I was starting off, but unfortunately I had to learn this the hard way, but I want to share this valuable information with you today. So there's a lot of tips to go through, so let's get started. A guitar absolutely needs to feel good in your hands. Setups are everything and completely necessary for beginners. So don't skimp on proper setup when buying new gear. The neck is the guitar's most important part. If you don't like the feel of a neck when you're trying it out, don't buy it. It's as simple as that. Buying used makes a lot of sense because today it's mostly a buyer's market. So buying used will save you a ton of money and you can find some really great deals that way. Always play before you pay. If you can't try it, don't buy it. Always sleep on it before you make a major purchase. More often than not, you will make the correct decision in the morning. Try to get more than a 24-hour approval period when buying online or from your local store. Other people's definition of mint may be way different than what you expect. So get lots of photos of the gear you're intending to buy or go see it in person whenever you can. When buying used gear, make sure you're buying something that you can at least break even with if you decide to sell it later. Buying something you can't unload later really sucks, and most gear eventually gets sold off. If you're a non-smoker, always ask about whether the instrument or amp was in a non-smoking environment, because cigarette smell is a bear to get out. Always, always, always research the true value of a guitar when buying used. Use Reverb.com or eBay to track what similar items are selling for to give you a more accurate idea of their true value before making an offer. Also, don't forget to negotiate. So the worst that can happen is that the seller will refuse to budge on the price. Yet negotiation can often save you another 10 to 15% on the total asking price easily. Don't overlook a great instrument just because of poor setup. Oftentimes, a good setup is all it takes to make that used guitar great. And 80% of the time, a guitar has not been set up properly when in the shop. If you're buying a parts caster guitar or a do-it-yourself amp kit that was built by someone else, you probably won't be able to resell it for what you paid for it. So if you decide to sell it later, be prepared to sell it at a loss, or worst case scenario, keep it forever. Similar guitars are all different from one another, even among same model years. So it's important to try as many as you can before you decide on the one that will be a keeper when you're in the shop. You'll be surprised how different they actually can be from one another. If you're thinking about upgrading or switching one of your favorite guitars for something new and you don't have a chance to play the new one first, I strongly suggest that you buy the new one before you sell your old one. This way you can always play them both side by side and then decide which one to keep. This will avoid any seller's remorse down the road. Don't underestimate the potential of budget gear. Some budget gear has great potential and can be easily modded or upgraded to compete with much more expensive stuff. When considering buying an amp or an acoustic guitar, have someone else play it while you listen to it from a few feet away. You can usually hear the true tone and projection of the guitar or amp much better if you're not actually the one playing it. When shopping for a Les Paul, ask for the weight of the instrument because heavier guitars can end up being a real pain to play after a while and you may just regret your purchase. Be extra diligent when buying anything from eBay. Photos can very easily hide major defects and descriptions can be quite creative. So be suspicious and make sure you ask all your questions before you buy. If you have any doubts about the item, just don't buy it. Don't overlook a great guitar just because of shitty pickups. Pickups can be easily upgraded and the old set sold off if required. Never take your wife or girlfriend with you when seriously shopping for a guitar. It will most likely mess with your haggling when it's time to buy. Sorry, honey. Dead strings can make a great guitar sound average, so take that into consideration when evaluating used gear. Always check the truss rod when buying a used guitar. It's a must and is often overlooked. Avoid buying new if you can. Let the other guy pay depreciation value on the gear. You'll save as much as 40% right off the bat. When buying an amp, turn all the knobs to 10 with no guitar plugged into it and see if the amp makes any strange noises. It shouldn't. If it does, then there's probably an issue that needs further investigation, so you might want to take it to an amp tech before you drop down any serious cash for it. Don't buy counterfeit guitars. They are rarely worth the trouble it takes to get them to play and sound good. Also, they'll be very difficult to sell later on and generally not worth the trouble. Eyes will sometimes lie, but ears rarely do. When you're buying any gear, pay attention, listen carefully, listen to your ears, and don't get swayed by your eyes, which can sometimes happen when you're in a store with a lot of eye candy. So pay attention to your ears. If the seller can't prove that that great guitar you found for way less than it's worth was not stolen, be prepared to live with the fact that it just may be stolen. Buzzing strings usually indicate that there's an issue with the neck, the nut, or the setup. If you don't know which one it is, don't buy that used guitar. If you're buying via eBay or mail, always ask for a tracking number and insurance. Rent before you buy if you can. It'll cost you a little bit more, but it'll save you lots of money and regret in the long run. You really need to live with a guitar or amp for a few days to really understand its true potential and limitations. YouTube video reviews are great for general information and to give you a rough idea of what some gear can do, but it's smarter to try before you buy. So don't rely on YouTube videos alone when shopping for new gear. When buying used gear, always prepare a written document which states the item you're purchasing, the seller's name, the amount paid, and the date of sale. You should both the seller and the buyer should sign this document. This will protect you from devious sellers who claim that their gear was stolen after actually selling it, so they can make false insurance claims. It'll also come in handy should you decide to sell the items later, and it will come in as proof that the item was not stolen. It may even be useful to take a photo with the seller and the gear in the shot to use as proof if needed in the future. Better safe than sorry. Always buy local and beware of remote offers that seem to be too good to be true. If someone is selling a vintage Strat, for example, for far less than it's worth, and they're located out of town, think twice before sending any cash. It most likely is a scam, and scammers can be quite creative these days. When buying gear off of an online classified ad site, avoid sellers who will only meet you in a remote parking lot or other public location, especially if you have no way of tracking them down later. Sellers who don't disclose a phone number, home address, or refuse to meet you at their own residence usually are hiding something. Scammers never invite you to make a deal at their own homes. The most important thing to remember when buying used gear is that you, the buyer, are responsible to make sure you're not taken for a ride. So ask as many questions as you can, try to get photos, go see the items in person, try them out before you buy. And if you're not getting the right answers from the seller, or something just seems a little bit off and you're getting a feeling that something might be wrong, go with your gut, because it's usually telling you the right thing. Be prepared to walk away from the deal. It's better to lose a deal than to be taken for a ride and have a whole bunch of issues to deal with afterwards. So I hope the list of tips that I've shared with you today could come in handy when you're buying new or used gear, and make it a pleasurable experience and not a nightmare. If you haven't already subscribed to our channel, please click subscribe below, because there's going to be more great tips, gear reviews, and demos coming your way. So stay tuned and keep on rocking.